Hello, Emma Rees Crime here, your fellow crime thriller and mystery book lover. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I have for you my 16 worst ever books which I have ever read. I was going to do my 10 most hated books, but as I was curating the list, more books kept popping into my head and I kind of hate them all equally and I just couldn't remove any, so we've got 16 today. If you've been following me for a while, it may surprise you that I'm not including any books by Richard Osman in this video because by now you get the point, I'm not a fan. Make sure that you stick around to the very end of the video because my final book is very controversial. Started with my worst book, I just wanted to credit what Michaela reads because I have stolen this idea from her. Thank you very much for the idea. Book number 1 of the worst books which I have ever read is All the Colours of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. I saw so many incredible reviews for this book and I'm pretty sure the Goodreads rating for this is so high, and it is classed as a thriller and it follows the story of a missing child, so it did sound like it'd be right up my street. The book is split into 3 parts, I believe, and I did quite enjoy part 1, but then by the time I got to part 2, it dragged. The language was really difficult to read as a dyslexic, and it just felt like I was reading pretentious nonsense. And even though the story does sound like it's a thriller book, I wouldn't really class it as a thriller. I'd say it was more a contemporary book. Yeah, it just wasn't my cup of tea. I ended up DNFing it. Sometimes I feel like I've read a completely different book to other people because it gets so many rave reviews. Next up is This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. I find the more of her thriller books I read, the more and more I don't enjoy them. I started off really strong with The Last Housewife, and then from then on it's been on a slow downward trajectory. In This Book Will Bury Me, a girl seeks comfort after the passing of her father in true crime forums, armchair detectives, so to speak. And obviously they start trying to solve some cases. For This Book Will Bury Me, it was inspired by a real life case, and while I don't take any issue with authors getting inspiration from true crime, the issue I found with this book was that the case that this book took inspiration from, by the time the book was published, hadn't even gone to trial yet. I didn't even know that that would be allowed. In my head, surely that book in a way could influence a jury. Apparently it is allowed because obviously it got published, but it just didn't sit right with me. And also, on top of all that, I actually thought it was really poorly written. I gave it 1 star and I never, ever give books 1 star. I kind of hate Reddit to get to the end. Next up is The Family Doctor by J.M. Dalglish, which is a popcorn thriller. Main character, whose name I can't remember because I read it ages ago, daughter is kidnapped and the kidnapper tells her that she has to murder somebody in order for her daughter to go free. This person is a doctor, so obviously they're hoping that she can use her medical expertise to murder somebody and go undetected. First of all, what really annoyed me about this was the premise was really similar to Do No Harm by Jack Jordan, which had been released a few years prior to this. My second issue with the book was the dialogue. On every other page, one of the characters seemed to stammer. You know, there was lots of the what, the there, and please don't cancel me, I have no issue with speech impediments, but as a dyslexic, reading people stammering all the time was incredibly difficult. And my third and final issue with this book was that it was just so predictable, and honestly, I don't see this very often, but I think I could have done a better job myself. The fourth book is The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins. I had such high hopes with this book because I am a huge fan of The Girl on the Train. However, this was just pretentious and boring and I ended up DNFing it. I gave it a really good shot, but yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea, and a few people have seen my reviews of this book and they have said the same thing, so quite a lot of us haven't really enjoyed it. I do think I should maybe try some of her other works, but then I also wonder if The Girl on the Train was just her one hit and everything else is just rubbish. Michaela, if you are watching this video, then skip, because the next worst book which I've ever read is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. It's a feminist horror book about a cult, and I'm not going to say any more than that about it. And I love the cult trope, however, this just wasn't my cup of tea. It was a bit weird and wacky. It was my first ever Rachel Harrison book, and I do find that she is very hit or miss with me, and this one was a very big miss. Next up is The Guest by Emma Cline. So it follows this girl, and she's kind of a gold digger, and she has a rich boyfriend who breaks up with her. She has to leave his apartment and she has nowhere to go, and she is determined to win him back because she wants to continue living that lifestyle. Guys, honestly, it was so boring. I felt like there was no point to the story at all. This horrible woman is just walking around, being an idiot, being annoying, angering me, and then I should have DNF'd it really, but I didn't, and I got to the end, and the ending was so unsatisfactory. I will not read anything by this author after that because I just thought it was awful. Next up was mine and Michaela's December book club pick, which was Death Comes at Christmas. So this is a collection of short stories written by loads of big thriller authors such as C.L. Taylor, Russ Thomas, other authors escape me, but there's loads in there. I had really high hopes for it because there are some big names in this book. However, out of, I think it was 14 short stories, I only liked one. I thought the rest were rubbish, and I think the general consensus at book club was most people didn't really enjoy it. They liked the odd one, but as a whole, no one really liked it. Next up is Blood Like Mine by Stuart Neville. I went to a book signing with C.L. Taylor, and she was talking about how she'd recently read this book and loved it, so following this I had really high expectations, but unfortunately it fell flat. Wherever main character Rebecca and her daughter Moonflower go, there always seems to be a trail of bodies left behind, and the main detective in the story believes that they have something to do with it. Part of the reason as to why I didn't enjoy this book was C.L. Taylor said something about this book, and it was a huge spoiler. So there's like a twist halfway through, but I was reading this book knowing that this twist was happening, and then when the twist hit I was like, oh, I wasn't supposed to know that. So that was part of the problem. And the other issue with the book was I just didn't like the pacing. It was slow. I didn't like the writing style. It was a bit confusing and ambiguous, and overall it just wasn't really my cup of tea. Even if C.L. Taylor hadn't given us a spoiler by accident, I still think that this book would have made the list. Next up is Argylle. I can't remember the name of the author, but it'll be here because actually the two authors were Terry Pratchett and Tammy Cohen, and this is a spy thriller which isn't really my usual kind of thing. However, Henry Cavill was starring in the movie, and I really like to try and read books before I watch the movie if there is a book of the movie, but I hated the book so much I didn't even bother to go see the movie, even though there was Henry Cavill, but he did have a stupid haircut, to be fair. Next up is End of Story by AJ Finn. People always rave about his book The Woman in the Window, which I've not read, but I did have high hopes for End of Story because it sounded really good and obviously had a reputation for having a really good previous book. Mystery author Sebastian Trapp is on his deathbed, so he invites Nikki, who he's been corresponding with for years, to help him write his memoir. 20 years prior to this, his teenage son and first wife had disappeared. It actually gives me slight vibes of The Ghostwriter by Julie Clark, but obviously this one was written first. I soft DNF'd this, and then I decided to come back to it at a later date, and I probably wish that I hadn't bothered giving it a second chance. It was so slow and so boring. It was a real struggle to get through those pages. What I will say though was there was a fantastic twist. So I guess, would I rather have read a better book? Yes, but at least it had a great twist towards the end. I shouldn't have been surprised that I would hate Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh because it is a YA romance book, but guys, I had serious FOMO. It's about toxic teenage romance and it is incredibly long. I think it took me a month on my Kindle to get through. It was a struggle. I probably should have DNF'd it. I thought that the main character Shannon was a pick-me girl. She was really whiny, really annoying, she angered me. And then I also thought that her love interest and other main character Johnny, he was just a freak. He was so weird. I do feel now I'm at an age where I just don't want to be reading about horny teenagers. I am too old for that. No, just not for me. I'm not a huge fan of the romance genre anyway, for various reasons. I find it slow, it's boring, it's predictable. But a big thing I hate about romance is not all of them, but the vast majority of them, I find romanticize toxic relationships. Don't get me wrong, I love it when I read a rom-com with toxic people, but they're supposed to be toxic and it's part of the fun of the story. But when it's romanticized and these toxic, awful people are put on a pedestal, I hate it. I just don't think that's okay. 11 books down and 5 to go. If you're still with me and enjoying what you're seeing and not doing so already, if you're able to hit that subscribe button, it would mean so much to me. Also, while I've got you, you can also find me on Instagram, You can find me on TikTok, and I also have a website where I put all my book reviews on if you want to check that out as well. These are all linked on my link tree in my YouTube bio. Next up is Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I read this after reading The Only One Left because that book was fantastic, so I had high hopes for this. I just went on to Goodreads to refresh my memory of my review and also to remind myself about what the plot was about, and my review is literally DNF at 60%, not to be dramatic or anything, but I just can't, and that is kind of an accurate representation of my memory of this book. Can't remember what the plot is about, but I remember really struggling to get through it, getting to that 6% mark, being exasperated, angry, annoyed, frustrated by how bad the writing was, DNFing it, and then I remember I got my friend to spoil it, and I'd guessed the ending anyway, so I did the right choice in DNFing it. Next up is Silence of the Dead by Simone St. James. This was my second book by her. I read the book of Cold Cases, which I thought was alright, and this was an older book by hers, which was getting re-released. I was going to DNF this book, but I walked up this massive spiral staircase in order to get this picture of the book for a review. So I soldiered on through this book so that I could post my review on Instagram with that photo. Since then, if I go into a lot of work taking a photo but end up DNFing it, I still write a review so I can at least put my hard photography skills at use. This book made me realise that this author isn't for me. I thought the Book of Cold Cases was alright, but I didn't quite get why everyone was hyping about it so much. And then when this book was re-released, people were hyping about it. I thought it was terrible. So yeah, I just think that this author's writing is not my cup of tea. She kind of writes creepy, supernaturally thrillers, which I do enjoy, but not hers. I feel that we all know what Girl A is about by now, so I won't go into details about what it's about, but this definitely makes my worst books ever. I felt like I was seeing this book everywhere. I think it had a really big marketing campaign, so I just felt like this book was being rammed down our throats, but because there was such a big marketing campaign, loads of press about it, you would think that this book would be good. However, no, it was awful. Why did the publisher put all that money into such a rubbish book? I don't understand. I actually posted about some of my least favourite books which I've read on my Instagram and TikTok account, and loads of people agreed with me with Girl A. So it's not just me. I think the general consensus is that it is just not a very good book. Next up is Gone Girl, which I am sure you are all familiar with as well, so I won't bore you with the blurb. And the reason I hate this book so much is that 1 year prior to this book being released, Linwood Barclay published a book called Never Look Away, which was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic. And then a year later, Gone Girl came out. There was loads of hype. Obviously, it was being made into a movie. So obviously, naturally, I had high expectations. I'm not saying that this author ripped off Linwood Barclay because I don't know. But all I'm saying is that this book was published a year after Linwood Barclay's book, and there was a lot, and I mean a lot of similarities between the two, including the major twist. So since then, I've always held a grudge because obviously Gone Girl got made into a movie. It was the A-list cast. That author would have made loads of money from it. And then I just felt really sorry for Linwood Barclay because I actually thought that his book was better and he didn't get the movie and he did that twist first. The last book of my worst book ever, a lot of you are gonna shout at me and strongly disagree with me, but obviously reading is subjective and it keeps life interesting, but that book for me was The Last Passenger by Will Dean. Main character and her fiance or partner or whatever, they go on a cruise and then she wakes up one day and everyone on this cruise ship has just vanished. While the concept for this book was unique, I'll give it that, I also thought it was silly and stupid, but not in a good way. I was just getting really angry as I read it. Again, it was one of those books which I hate read. I probably should have DNF'd it, but I couldn't help myself. You know when something's awful and you can't look away? Well, that's kind of how I felt when reading it. And then I suffered through all that nonsense only to get the most anger-inducing ending I have ever come across. Honestly, I nearly threw my Kindle at a wall. I was so angry. If you know the ending, you know. I also just think that Will Dean's writing isn't for me, because I read The Last Thing to Burn, which everyone raves about, and I thought was okay. I didn't really understand the hype, so maybe Will and we just don't get on. I'll probably give him a third chance, but if I don't get on with a third book of his, then that's it. I'm not actually a huge fan of books written by celebrities as a general rule, and I haven't actually included any books in this video written by celebrity authors. But if you're interested in my opinions on celebrity authors and why I think that they suck, I've done a video here. Also, make sure to check out my July reading wrap up as well. Thank you ever so much for taking your time to watch this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you, bye.